Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the February 5th Fairfax Town Council meeting. And I would like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. And can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Kohler. Here. Councilmember Hellman.
Here.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Vice Mayor Ackerman.
Here.
Mayor Goddard.
I am here. Thank you. Announcement from our closed session is that we gave direction to our negotiator to work with the Police Officers Association labor union. And with that, let's go ahead and look at the agenda. Does anyone have anything to reorder on the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda and the affidavit of posting.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we have a motion Kohler and a second Reed, and the motion passes. And at this point, the meeting protocol, I will continue to repeat that speakers will all have 3 minutes to speak. You may have 5 if you are representing a group. There's always an opportunity to be a group, and so I would really urge you to decide when you're actually speaking for your group and when you may not be. I would very much like to ask people to monitor your time. So there is a clock right there, and when you're standing at the podium, please keep an eye on that clock. I will have a nod from the town clerk that alerts me, but I'm not looking at any timekeeping device. So I would really appreciate you guys self-monitoring so that I don't have to interrupt anybody, because I know how important it is when you're speaking. And at 10 o'clock, we will review the agenda. And at 11:30, if there's anything that hasn't begun yet, we will either decide to continue it or we will waive that and continue on with the meeting. Can we please continue with any announcements? I guess that's me. So, announcements. We have vacancies on boards and commissions, and these are the ones that have vacancies. The Climate Action Committee has up to 3 vacancies. Our Open Space Committee, does it no longer have 1 vacancy? We just filled the vacancy. So I would like to thank Jonathan Seacroft for joining the Open Space Committee. That makes us complete. Congratulations, Open Space Committee, and thank you. Our Planning Commission has 1 scheduled vacancy. So if anyone is listening and anyone is interested in joining the Planning Commission, please do fill out an application, which you can get at Town Hall. The Fairfax Food Pantry continues to serve the community and beyond on Saturdays from 8:30 to 10:30. It's at the Fairfax Community Church at the corner of Sir Francis Drake and Oak Manor. There's always volunteers needed. They need early morning setup, but especially to take things down. Please let people know if anyone is hungry, needs any food at all, please do go to the pantry, and that's why they're there, and we have amazing volunteers to serve you. A very exciting announcement is that Victory Village, which is the 53-unit affordable housing project down on Sir Francis Drake at, what's the street crossing?
It's Mitchell.
It's Mitchell. Everyone knows where it is. Anyway, the February 20th, February 15th, the application period opens for the wait list, and you can get all the information you need on the town website, www.townoffairfax.org. And you can also sign up for agendas for council and for planning commission meetings on that website. Please do visit the website. Before we begin in open time, I often like to dedicate a meeting. Tonight, I'll come back to that. Okay. Tonight is a night that I really felt we needed to take pause and come together as a community. Last week, a Drake High School student, a well-loved, vivacious, smart, creative, life-seeking young man named Shane Revitoy, took an extreme and lethal dose of a psychedelic mushroom. And I spoke with his mother this morning, and she was very eager for me to share his story and wants everyone to know about it. He went to his parents' room and he told them that he had found God and that life has made sense now. Everything was figured out, and he stroked his mom's cheek and he ran downstairs and jumped off a 40-foot balcony to his death. The reason I share is because I don't think I've ever known of a time where it's more important for us all to come together, multi-generationally, people with wisdom, people who understand drugs or don't understand drugs, people who need support, people with mental illness, people who seem fine, but maybe of a different age and you just don't know if you can relate to one another. Please do reach out to one another. Know that we're all in this together. This is a heightened time of anxiety on so many levels in our world. And I do think that we all make all the difference for one another. And so at the start of a meeting, I want to take this opportunity just to let people know that there's a lot of pain going through our young community and our multi-generational community here. And everyone knows about this. And Lisa Hudson is Shane's mother and is heroic and is talking to kids. She's very cool. She is not a no-drug lady. She is a lady that understands youth and talks openly and wants to teach and took it upon herself at the memorial to talk to the kids about drugs, about being careful. We live to extremes these days, and at this point I think it's time for us to take a moment. If we could just take 30 seconds right now, send our wishes to the family and all of the hundreds of friends that are struggling right now. Thank you all very much. And with that, actually, this is appropriate because Stephanie has an announcement to make about some fantastic teen programming that we're bringing to the community. So, Stephanie.
I was going to say relevant to that. The principal of Drake sent out a community notice of a community event on Thursday, February 13th at 6:30 for grief and loss support, facilitated by Hospice, which is obviously a partner of Wellness. So if anyone's interested in that. And I will say, as a parent of a senior at Drake, I want to commend Drake for how they're handling this matter. And they have a wellness center, and they have a wonderful community at Drake. And thank you, Renee. It's been a hard time for the community, but we are a beautiful, tight-knit community that I think has been handling it with a lot of love and support. So thank you. On a lighter note, the Fairfax Park and Rec Department and a handful of us, including Renee and I, have been working on a lineup of some fun teen event series. And the first one starts this Saturday night, and it is Dodgeball Night. So it's 7 to 9 p.m., And it is for the whole community. It is not just for Fairfax. So please invite your friends in the Ross Valley. So this Saturday, February 8th, 7 to 9. The next event is an open mic night at the Women's Club. And that's February 29th. That's a Saturday from 6:30 to 9 p.m. And then we have a ping pong tournament, and that's in the pavilion. And I don't know if I mentioned if the dodgeball night is in the pavilion. So dodgeball this Saturday night. Open mic is in the Women's Club on the 29th. Ping pong at the pavilion on March 21st, which is a Saturday, 6:30 to 9. And then we have Battle of the Bands at the pavilion on April 18th. So all of this is in the Park and Rec guide, and we have it on Facebook. You can get it via email. We also have a flyer, and it'll be in the town newsletter. So there's lots of ways we can get the information out to you. We'll also have it in tonight's minutes if you get the minutes. So thank you.
All right, thanks. So now it's time for open time for public expression. As I said, 3 minutes, please, or 5 if you're representing a group. And these are for items that are not on the agenda. So come on down. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard Applebaum, 61 Woodland. I have put this out on social media before, and I posted it today, and I thought I would just make a quick mention here now that I'd like to be maybe some dialogue from the public and the council just about different strategies that could improve the council meetings and efficiency. And I floated an idea of splitting this meeting that happens on the Wednesdays into 2 meetings that would happen on the Tuesday before the Wednesday. And my general notion is that the Tuesday would be like a 7 to 9, and it would do all the announcements and reports and presentations that don't have any bearing on something that's going to be voted on, and all the open time, all the non-agenda stuff. And staff wouldn't have to have all their materials prepared because there would be non-agenda stuff, and that could maybe be the Tuesday, and then Wednesday could just continue in our next day and roll right into agenda matters. Maybe that could get us into more of a 7 to 10 on the Wednesday and a 7 to 9 on the Tuesday. And so I'm not trying to create more meetings so that we can pile on more things to do and overwhelm the staff. That's not the purpose of it. It's just to try to take what's often ending up at 11, 11:30, 12 sometimes. People are not at their best. They're not at their sharpest. Voting at that time, people can't stay. I've sat here so many times for 5 hours, because I'm interested and I want to hear everything. I want to give my input, but few people can do that. And so there may be other ideas that are better. There may be reasons that I'm not aware of that you all understand why what I just suggested is not exactly practical in that exact way. But that's an initial thing, and I've put it out on social to let you can see how the rest of the community is commenting on it or whatever. So just passing that along.
Thank you, and thanks for putting that out there. Jody?
Good evening, Jody Timms. Cascade Drive and your representative to the Commission on Aging. In the name of anti-ageism, I have a few reflections tonight on aging in Fairfax, since everybody's doing it. I just want to remind us all that every age and every stage of life has tremendous value and worth. As a young person, it can be easy to feel that you're not taken seriously. You might feel unheard or disrespected, even labeled foolish or naive. As an older person, one can also feel that you don't really matter anymore, so that some folks would prefer that you get out of the way because you're old-fashioned or out of touch. But as I heard recently, young horses run fast, old horses know the road. We all matter and have intrinsic value at every age, and granted, every age has disadvantages and limitations, but I encourage us all to enjoy, love, and value all of life's journey. It's hard to hear that story a bit ago about the young man. I started my morning, had a beautiful memorial for a woman at the Redwoods who lived to be 95. And it was so deeply moving, and I'm just sad that this young man's family won't have that experience of remembering him through so many years of a lifetime. So, calendar-wise, the next Commission on Aging meeting is tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. It's on falling strategies, so both preventing falls, reducing injuries, and landing safely. That's at the Margaret Todd in Novato. Also tomorrow on the 6th, from 12 to 2, of course, is our Ross Valley Seniors Luncheon and socializing, and they'll be discussing Measure C, the Wildfire Prevention Authority Initiative. Our age-friendly Fairfax Forum this month is on wills and trusts, so that's next Friday at 1 o'clock. It's very important, if you don't have a will, to think about whether you need one, if you have one, if it should be updated. So Lisa Fialco, one of our local attorneys, will be at the library for the hour, and it's a great time to get the peace of mind that comes with getting your legal documents in a row and learning the basics of estate planning. And then coming back to the commission for a minute, as you know, our job as commissioners to the Board of Supervisors is to listen to and engage with our communities so that we are aware of what older adults want and need. And then our job is to advocate on their behalf to our towns, our districts, and before the Board of Supervisors. I spoke before the Board of Supervisors this last Tuesday, expressing my appreciation to them for their support in creating the age-forward, age-friendly strategic plan for the County of Marin. The production of that was really quite a huge accomplishment and something that I know I spent numerous years advocating for. So I just want to finish tonight by introducing my two fellow commissioners from District 2, which of course Fairfax is a part of. So Woody Weingarten from San Anselmo and Wendy Nessel from Fairfax are two of our commissioners who also represent the town of Fairfax. And I think they might just want to say hello.
Hi, I'm Woody Weingarten. Basically, what I want to say is that it's really a pleasure being here and getting to know you. I've represented this district for a year in San Anselmo as well, and Ross and Kenfield, and I'm just beginning to learn the ropes. When I moved into San Anselmo 33 years ago, it was funky. It was much more like Fairfax is still, and I admired both towns for their funkiness. San Anselmo has become a little boutique-y, but I love it just as much. I was on the Quality of Life Commission in San Anselmo for 10 years, and I ran it for 7. And that was an environmentally based sustainability commission. And I was always a little jealous because Fairfax seemed to be a little bit ahead of us. When I got on the Commission of Aging and the age-friendly group in San Anselmo, as well as the county version, I found that Fairfax was ahead of us. My role, I think, with Jody's help as a mentor, is to make San Anselmo equal to Fairfax.
Your Sustainability Commission is taken off.
I know.
Hi, I'm Wendy Nestle. I live on Alima Road here in Fairfax, and I'm the newest commissioner on the Commission on Aging here in Marin, and really excited. I've been working the last 22 years for the Department of Public Health in San Francisco as a medical social worker, and I'm a gerontologist, a graduate student. I graduated in 1997 from UC Berkeley. So I was a PTA president here at Manor Elementary for 2 years, and then I started the Children for Change at Manor School, and helped lead that the last 4 years. And now I'm super excited to join the Commission on Aging and serve here locally for the older adults and seeing how we can help better meet the needs that we can identify. I did join the Health and Nutrition Committee officially. So we're going to be working on food safety and food security, especially during times of emergencies and power outage kinds of situations. So, hello.
Thank you guys very much.
Good evening, Council. My name is Chance Catrano, and I'm here representing the Fairfax Open Space Committee. At our January meeting, it came to the attention of the Fairfax Open Space Committee via members of the public that the owner of 200 Toyon had allegedly destroyed endangered Napa false indigo plants on his undeveloped lot for which he had recently received entitlements. Town staff confirmed this transgression and stated that the town is currently working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Marin County Open Space, and the Marin Municipal Water District on what the reparation process will be. And we understand it may include paying professionals to gather seeds from existing Napa false indigo populations for transport and storage at the State Seed Bank down in Los Angeles, and may also include improving existing populations here in Marin. But it does not necessarily rectify the transgression at the lot in question, a transgression which presumably was committed to reduce impediments to development on that lot. The Fairfax Open Space Committee has for several years placed 200 Toyon as a discussion item at our meetings, and the committee has previously engaged this owner regarding acquisition, as it would be a natural extension of Pam's Blue Ridge Trail and Cascade Canyon Open Space Preserve. The Open Space Committee was not notified of this transgression, but would like to be kept abreast of the reparations process as it continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chance. That's all for open time. Okay, we now have the pleasure of receiving a presentation from the Fairfax volunteers. And before the GO, I assume you're going to be the presenter? Or are you all presenting? Chance is going to help me answer questions. Okay, excellent. So before we start, though, could I ask all the Fairfax volunteers to stand up and receive a rousing applause from the audience? And just a heartfelt thanks for all you do. I think we're getting more and more and more good energy in this town, and I know that you guys lead up a ton of it. So thank you. Look forward to the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, the Fairfax Volunteer Board is a unique town function. We have a mission which is to foster goodwill and create community spirit in Fairfax. So it's like the town has authorized us to bring people together to create goodwill and community spirit. It's a pretty awesome task. And it was really heartful, Renee, to hear what you said and also Jody's presentation to give us that feeling of what a town is. I mean, I think most of us love Fairfax. We feel lucky to live here. And that community spirit that we feel here is something that the volunteer board is helping to direct and further. So I wanted to start by saying thank you to Garrett Toy and the council for the efforts that you've made. As we've extended our reach into the community, I feel like the town has felt that and has increased funding for various projects. And of course, with John up on the podium there, I want to thank him for his previous service to the volunteer board. I'm not sure I'm seeking a promotion to the town council by this address. But, and also, of course, Holly Bragman, who was a the board chairperson for 10 years. So under their tutelage, they brought legacy projects, what we call legacy projects, to the board, projects which most of you are familiar with, which is the town picnic, the community Seder, wreath making, and I always forget the last one. Well, there's the food pantry. So those are what we call projects that have been in existence for many years. And they all serve different populations, different constituencies, but they have the function of bringing people together. And I think that, Renee, you hit a very important note, that the idea of creating community spirit is more than just furthering the care and concern and the creativity that people have for each other. It's really a safety function. You know, when we look forward, sadly, to fire conditions, it's really important that we have a community that knows each other, that feels good about each other, and knows what resources are available. So the volunteers are taking a role in developing the fire-safe communities. And right now, there's probably hundreds of people in Fairfax that are going to meetings about fire safety. And so that's a natural function of our board. You know, one of the reasons I wanted to make a presentation to the board is because in the last several years, we've been expanding our mission, you could say. We've moved beyond some of the legacy projects. And we've started to create more projects that would bring townspeople together. And so briefly about each one of those, last year we had the first Fairfax singer-songwriter talent show, which was hugely popular and which will become hopefully a legacy event. And Veronica Goritz, who's one of our newer board members, created the Community Sit meditation in Fairfax, which I think is a huge addition to community spirit. It's a quarterly event. And we've also been re-engaging and reactivating the volunteers through volunteer appreciation events, and also trying to bring boards and commissions together in a more deliberate way so that people could interact around the needs of the different commissions. So it's exciting to be working with a group of tremendously creative and dedicated volunteers, because enthusiastically they and we have taken on these new forms of outreach for the purposes of goodwill and creating community spirit. And I did want to make a special note about Maria Baird. I mean, as you can imagine, her responsibilities have been extended over the last couple of years, and perhaps you may not actually know that. But if you think about all the background work that it takes to put on those new functions, Maria, as you know, is a professional with a huge heart for Fairfax. I think of her as the heart of the volunteer board. And her warmth attracts people, and then they can serve us. So I wanted to put in an appreciation for Maria. She sadly lives in Nevada and is not here. But the last thing I wanted to say was just had to do with generosity. I said to one of the board members, I feel you as volunteers. You are volunteers for Fairfax. So to be aligned with a group of creative, dedicated volunteers for the purposes of serving Fairfax, it just feels like a wonderful honor for me to be able to do that. And it seemed like I had somewhere in my notes, which Stephanie appreciated. Like, here they are, Stephanie. It's kind of confusing, but oh yeah, there was one thing. So one of our goals for the new year is to formalize and create more of a project incubator for Fairfax, so that you all know that we are like a source or resource for you if you want to create a project that has to do with anything that we've talked about in here. We want to help you find volunteers for that. So we're talking about social justice, social service, health, safety, creative arts. We want to reach out into the community and let people know that as a town function, we have resources, one of which is the reputation, which I believe is built on the work of John and Holly, that people love the volunteer board. And so we have connections in the community and businesses, other nonprofits, other consultants, experts. That's a resource that we can open the door to other projects. We have the town newsletter, some use of town space. And something that I think I've grown to appreciate is that when somebody comes to the board with a project, we have a tremendous resource of other projects that we've started in Fairfax. So it's easy for us to open doors and let people know who's the best contact for certain kind of other resources or other buildings or other art projects, et cetera. So that'll be a project which will unfold over the next couple of years. And that's really the end of my presentation. I wanted Chance to come up and help me. If there's any questions from people that are here or from the council.
Yes, I think we have a question right here. Stephanie?
I just wanted to confirm or play back what I think you just said. So, for example, these teen events I just spoke of, if we need some resources, some volunteer help, so we could come to you, for example, if we needed 2 or 3 people, we could come to you and for support?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of overlap. And one of the things that we're really excited about this year, Georgia has been spearheading this new process for us where people can sign up online to volunteer at events, and there will be slots for different things so volunteers can know exactly what they're signing up for and the time for slots. So that'll be coming on board this year, I imagine. But and it's going to be fantastic for us too to understand the resources in our community. But currently right now, yeah, absolutely, we have people that we can lend to help out on all these teen events.
Awesome, thank you. Is it like a sign up genius type thing?
Yeah, it'll be on. So all of the websites are being integrated into the town for the boards and commissions. So the volunteer board is now live on the town website, and this new process will be integrated into that town website.
Great. Any other questions for Gio and Chance?
Stephanie, also, we can facilitate getting information to Camille about the newsletter, so we're kind of an avenue for information that you want into the newsletter. We can help you with that as well.
Terrific, thank you.
Any questions from the public or comment from the public? Jesse? You have to come up, because otherwise then you're not on TV.
I heard that you guys had a great cleanup of the creek event. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I was going to mention that's one of your legacy projects, is it not?
Yeah, every July we tend to do the creek cleanup, and we invite also sort of a specialist in the realm of creeks and hydrology and stuff. 2 years ago, we had someone from mosquito vector control that was like absolutely fantastic, not just for us adults, but also for children to understand sort of what the creeks are like and what lives in the creeks. And yeah, this past year, our creek cleanup was fantastic. There's a photo on the volunteers website, on our social media, I believe, but like 4 or 5 massive bags full of trash that we picked up. And 2 years ago, John, Jesse, and myself pulled out a futon from one of the creeks. I kid you not. So yeah, fantastic opportunity. Look out for it in July on the town website, the calendar and whatnot.
All righty, I think that's it. With gratitude, thank you guys very much.
Thanks very much.
Gio?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, extend my gratitude to Garrett and the town council for supporting our efforts. And the fact that you guys authorize us to develop community spirit, I think, says actually a lot about the town.
Great. Appreciate it. So moving on, we're going to consider the consent calendar at this point. There's an opportunity for public comment before the council votes on the consent calendar. But does anyone have anything on consent? Barbara?
I just wanted to mention on item 4, which is the council members' assignments, et cetera, I neglected to mention one thing that I attended, which is the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members meeting, and the town pays for me to attend, so I wanted to make sure that got added. For number 6, which is the Sustainable Fairfax report, which I think is wonderful, I just wanted to add that the idea of zero waste goes beyond that. And for example, when we did the 90 and Better celebration, our 2nd annual, I pitched to our Age Friendly, which I'm part of, as well as the Ross Valley Seniors, that we do that as a zero waste event, and we did. And it's extra work, but I think to the extent we can get the word out for these events, it would be great. So I just want to thank you guys for all that you do. And that's all I had to add.
Great. Anybody else have anything on consent? Any comments or anything that you would like to pull? Looks like none. I have one quick one, seeing that our wonderful farmers market operators are here, and thank you guys for coming. I wanted to look at, if we may, just briefly, without pulling this. This is page 6 of item 7. And do you see that? Agenda item number 7, page 6. And we're looking at the it's the 3rd bullet point down about the plastic bag reduction ordinance. It does say the grantee will continue to monitor vendors to ensure that they are not using plastic bags for sales, and the grantee will have paper bags available for vendors that do not bring their own. There may be a waiver for the grantor to use plastic bags. I'm wondering if we want to specify that those be compostable bags. I'd be interested. It does make a difference. The issue being that actually both of them go to the landfill at this point and probably always will. If it were me, I would use a plastic bag because I could wash it.
I would
But
just.
I don't think, I want to make it clear because then our contract's ready to go should it be approved.
I would just suggest that we not require compostable bags because I know they end up in the landfill because there's not enough time for them to compost. And I think if you have meat, fish, and poultry, and there is some composting going on with those bags, it could get pretty nasty. I
Okay,
think
so
the
for those
waiver's there for a
exceptions, we'll
reason.
just keep it, like the meat and the fish, we'll keep it to plastic unless they choose.
That's just my suggestion.
No,
It seems
I'm
like
I'm
that's
with that
best.
I
too.
would
Anyone
support
else?
that suggestion, yeah. Because I think, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
And
Okay,
I think,
great. So that will be
quote,
approved on consent.
compostable plastic bags it's hopefully a flash in the pan to,
Yeah, this won't be very many that will use it. It's been informal in the past. So with that, I just need to say that I'm going to recuse myself for the vote on the...
Number 6,
Not number 6,
Sustainable
the
Fairfax.
Sustainable Fairfax item. So if we could go ahead and approve, or I'd like to
Do you
hear...
want to take public comment
Sorry. Yes, please, public comment
on everything except item 6?
on everything except item 6. Is it 6?
Yes, it is 6 is
Thank you.
Sustainable Fairfax.
Okay, so
Mark
everything
Bell,
except...
Dominga Avenue. Last year, you put this on the consent calendar, refused to pull it. One of the reasons was the woman operating the market doesn't make enough money to sit here to discuss it. We were promised no percussion. There was percussion. But really, the main issue is amplification. We were promised that the acts would be low volume, minimal amplification. Well, when I'm in my house with all the doors and windows closed and the walls are shaking and I'm listening to some guy who sounds like he has food poisoning, I'm wondering if I should call 911 or go to the police. We were told the police would monitor the situation. When I went to the police, they tell me, no, we're not going to do anything about it. That's what the captain said. So the commercial zone decibel limit is 60. That's in the noise ordinance and it's also in the general plan, as I pointed out previously. And that means 60 decibels at the sidewalk next to the market. It's not a reading at my house. It's not a reading down the street. It's there, 60 decibels. That's what it says. And actually, it should be 55 because you have an instrument and you have someone trying to vocalize. I don't see, I look at this thing and you're like, oh, wow, generators. Wow, a lot of noise. 68 decibel limit. How about us in Dominga? What about this community spirit? How come we're ignored when we continue to bring this issue up? I don't really want to listen to somebody for 4 hours sound like he's dying from food poisoning. Do you want me to give a replication of what it sounds like? I didn't think so. So I believe you should pull this item and change it to acoustic music or amplified music that would not project more than 60 decibels on the sidewalk. We've been in farmers markets in Salt Lake City. They have only acoustic music. It's a big market. They have about 7 people playing. So you can pick and choose who you want to listen to. We've been in Australia, outside of Sydney. They have amplified music. 20 feet away, you don't hear it at all. So this issue should be pulled and put forth and have that changed as far as what is allowed as entertainment.
Thank you, Mark. Chris, please come to the microphone.
Town council members, staff, and fellow Fairfax citizens. My name is Chris Lang. I live on Canyon Road. I worked on the Fairfax Festival for like 40 years. I used to book the band, stage manager, MC, the whole bit. And I really support the local nightclubs' use of amplified music. And I know Mr. Bell has got an ongoing complaint about live music in downtown Fairfax. But demographically speaking, there are fewer people coming to the clubs in Fairfax. And so I think live music, electronically amplified in downtown Fairfax is something very valuable and worth holding on to. It's part of our reputation. The Chamber of Commerce counts it as an important part of the elements that make Fairfax a desirable destination as well as a desirable place to live. And I think more cracking down on the music in town is counterproductive, and I agree with Mr. Bell that we should use a decibel meter, and if the police department wants to come out and measure the decibels at the prescribed distance from the source of the noise, I'm fine with that. You have to document the problem. We have to make sure the machine's calibrated properly. One time, just to make sure this wasn't going to happen to me, I had all my gas-powered tools lined up in my driveway at New Year's. The chainsaws, the weed whacker, the blower, the hedge cutter, everything. And I asked the police department to come up and measure the decibels and measure the feet, because that would be a scientific method. We could test to see if smart meters give off radiation. We can see how much noise gas-powered tools give off. We can do our own work. But staff has to be willing to work with the community to test these noises. And I thought it was a worthwhile endeavor, but I struck out. So I think that the decibel meter is an important tool, and I think that before you make a regulation regarding generators or pull the ordinance and review live music, all those places operate under conditional use permit. And that would have to be determined what the use permit says before we go off. So I think that it's important to understand how much noise generators make to start with before you try to regulate it. Because what if it's unrealistic and then no one can have a generator, otherwise a violation of noise ordinance?
Chris, we're not actually talking, that's an agendized item.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that's what we're talking
We're reviewing the
about.
farmer's market contract, but I understand your
I was just
point.
taking
Thank
off what
you.
he said. I apologize. I was
Yeah,
late,
no
but-
problem, but just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to let
sure,
you
that's
know,
fine.
we've heard your comment.
I can't stay anyway. But,
Okay,
so thank you.
thank you. All righty. Next, Richard.
Okay, I want to preface my remarks with, I'm very fond of Mark, and I love his band Helm, and I'm a little bit out of sync on this one. I think that our farmers market is one of the champion things that happens in our town, as I do with Art Walk and some other things. And I've been a farmers market person for 30 years, and when I got to Fairfax and our market was on Wednesdays from 4 to 8, and I realized we had a town gathering. People come, they sit on blankets, it's kids and families. It's a really, really wonderful vibe. And Karen does a great job, and I'm there almost every week. So I'm not like the casual goer who's there 3 times a year. Like out of the however 15 weeks or however it spans 4 or 5 months, I'm there maybe 2 or 3 times I miss. And this is anecdotal. I got no measurements, no readings, no whatever, and I have tremendous empathy. I would not want to be in my home and feel assaulted by something that felt distracting and overbearing. But most of what I've observed are usually single artists. Amplification is often a tiny little thing that someone just plugging in so they can be heard. I know that Karen made efforts last year to kind of push it farther away and change the sort of stage area, which was like less optimal for sort of the layout. And so if there's a particular Wednesday where something is just over the top, I don't remember ever seeing a full band that had drums and a heavy, Mark mentioned bass. I couldn't recall ever seeing anyone play bass. I'm not saying you're not, that didn't happen. I'm not denying your experience at all, Mark. But, so I have a slightly different perspective, which is and I'm for acoustic music. I have no problem with acoustic music as well. It's just that I've seen, tin drums, and I've seen a little African thing, and it's never felt to me like it was something that was really loud and offensive, and that's not the vibe down there. People are talking, families are gathering, people are eating, chatting. It's really, really lovely, and it just feels a little restrictive. It's also for 4 hours, once a week, for a portion of the year. And so again, empathy. I'm not the one on your street, in your house, feeling what you're feeling, and I really, really am sensitive to it. I'm sensitive to sound and smell and a lot of things. I'm a peculiar person. Not the easiest going person with the external environment things. But I would just, I'm only speaking to just prevent a little bit of a balance to this. And, you know, I'm sure Karen would make best efforts to make sure that there isn't going to be exceptionally loud things, and to talk to anyone who may have it up a little bit and bring it down. And maybe we can all just find a way to manage this in a more gentle way, and, you know, letters of the law. But obviously, if something's really crazy and extreme, it should be addressed. But I would just humbly suggest that generally the vibe is cool, and I've never been assaulted by the sound down there. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And before I entertain a motion, I do want to send a thank you to you too. You have been so flexible with everything that we've asked for, and we have some pretty strict requirements. I've seen Karen running around the market, changing things at the last minute that need to be changed, working with nonprofits, bringing really, really important opportunities for kids to show up and be there and do their thing without it being too strict, and that's been much appreciated. The community loves the farmers market. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion for all the consent items except for 6. At this time.
I'd like to make a motion. I just want to mention, though, the contract for the market says live music shall be allowed at the market provided. However, it is limited to groups without drums and with minimal amplification. And I know that doesn't address everyone's concerns, but I think that is a good balance. So I would make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the one change I added to item 4 and accepting item 6, which we'll take up separately. So it'll be 1 through 9 minus item 6.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. So motion Kohler and second Ackerman. And so I will step down and Bruce will lead you through the next item, which is number 6.
So item 6, which was taken off the consent calendar, is to receive the annual report from Sustainable Fairfax regarding its recycling, green waste, and public education and outreach services regarding the town's zero waste grant.
So Bruce, or Vice Mayor, that wasn't taken off consent. It's being handled separately
Okay.
on consent.
Pulled off as a separate item. So do we have any public comment on that item, item 6? Hearing none, do we have any council discussion or a motion?
I'll move to receive the annual report for Sustainable Fairfax regarding recycling, green waste, and public education / outreach services, and to implement the zero waste grant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the staff report does contain that report. Okay, if someone could let Renee know that she can re-enter the room. Ah, here she is.
Thank you, Bruce. Oh, we're losing people. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So following consent, we'll start with our public hearing item. Oh, we won't. Our public hearing, item number 10, as you'll see in the packet, this item has been continued to the March 4th council meeting. And so moving forward to the regular agenda, we are on item 11. And this is a second reading by title only and adoption of an ordinance incorporating the requirements for a Hill Area Residential Development Overlay Zone permit into multiple family residential, senior residential zone, Town Code Chapter 17.090, the Planned Development PDD District, Town Code Chapter 17.112, the Upland Residential UR7 and UR10 zones, Town Code Chapter 17.124, the Single Family Residential Master Plan SF-RMP District, Town Code Chapter 17.116, and amending the Hill Area Residential Development Overlay Zone, Town Code Chapter 17.072, exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines, sections 15060C2, 15061B3, 15378. And Garrett, could you give us a staff report?
Sure.
Please.
Your ordinance was actually introduced at your January 15th meeting. This is the second reading, so if you do that, it'd be adopted and take effect 30 days from tonight. Pretty much as we explained previously in your January 15th meeting, proposed ordinance adds the HRD provision to certain residential zoning districts in town. As we stated previously, it doesn't change your current road standards in any districts or affect the ability to impose any standards related to street standards for any of the districts. So pretty much, again, this is your second reading of an ordinance. That concludes the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any just questions at this time for staff? Seeing no questions, I'd like to open it to the public. Good evening, Frank.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Frank Ager, 13 Meadow Way, representing Safe Fairfax tonight. Two concerns I have expressed at both the Planning Commission meeting and at your last council meeting. This new law will change long-standing Fairfax policy that was purposely adopted to prevent access to new development through the use of a private road. In the 1970s, 3 lots were subdivided off of Bothian Road, about halfway up Bothian on the left side, and they were accessed with a private road. We had a fire up there, and the Fairfax Fire Department had a very difficult time trying to access it and extinguish the fire. That's when we wrote Fairfax's private road ordinance to restrict access to new development via a private street. Oh, I'm sorry, a public street. A private road could be blocked and make evacuation and public safety access very difficult. Speaking of evacuation, Fairfax experienced gridlock today with the accident at Drake and Pastoria. I mean, the whole town was gridlocked. Drake, Center, Broadway, Bolinas, no one could move anywhere. So it's real important about these evacuation issues. Existing planned development zone properties are already built out, and Fairfax should not provide private road access to build in their open space, number one. Number two, there are only 2 upland residential properties under consideration. Those 2 parcels, there are 2 parcels behind Victory Village and the 99 or 100 acre, depending on how you count the acreage, wall property where 10 units are proposed. Please delete C, access to the property via private road or public undeveloped roadway. We should not be recognizing a private road as a legal access for new development. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'd like to bring it back to see if you have any comments, final comments, or to move forward to make a motion.
Well, I recall that we went over this issue that Frank brings up, and I just do not see, in looking at the language, how the language that's in it now creates the ability to use a private road as access. It only says that the upland, that this overlay zone would apply with either a public or private road, which is, we could take out private road, but then that would just weaken the overlay zone if there ever was a private road. But there's not a private road access, and there's nothing that's changed in the code that prohibits private road access to a new development. So I just don't see where it's an issue. I don't see where making the overlay zone as inclusive as possible weakens anything else. So I would stay with the wording that we've already looked at and that we already went through the first reading on.
Thank you, Bruce. Is there anyone else? Okay.
I would make a motion
Okay.
unless somebody else wants to.
Please do.
Okay, so I would make a motion to read by title only and adopt an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax incorporating the requirement for a hill area residential development overlay zone permit into the multiple family residential senior residential zone Town Code Chapter 17.090, the Plan Development PDD District Town Code Chapter 17.112, the Upland Residential UR7 and UR10 zones, Town Code Chapter 17.124, and the Single Family Residential Master Plan SF-RMP District, Town Code Chapter 17.116, and amending the Hill Area Residential Development Overlay Zone, Town Code Chapter 17.072.
Is there?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed, so that was a motion Kohler, second Ackerman, and passes unanimously. Thank you. And so moving on to item 12. Sorry, one moment. This is to introduce and read by title only an ordinance amending Chapter 8.20 of the Fairfax Municipal Code, noise control to regulate the use of backup emergency generators during prolonged power outages. It's CEQA exempt per CEQA guidelines, section 15269C. So Garrett, can we please have a staff report?
Sure. So as you know, with the advent of PG&E's, what they call the Public Safety Power Shutoff, or PSPS, communities have had to adapt to kind of these prolonged power outages. So last October, you may recall, Fairfax residents and businesses experienced about 4 days of power loss during that time frame. During that time frame, what we found is a lot of residents were using portable generators. Actually, since that event, more residents have actually installed permanent generators. And so current town code really didn't address this issue of emergency backup generators. So that being said, we think it's important to amend the town code to really address this issue of both permanent and portable generators. And what we use as our guide is we use the Mill Valley and San Rafael's ordinance, and we kind of came up with this hybrid type ordinance that we came up with. And the main thing being is Mill Valley's ordinance really addressed the operational times and when you could use them. And San Rafael didn't set operational times. They really just used a decibel reading, and your generator had to be a certain distance away from the property line. And we just kind of melded those two to come up with this. So what this comes up with is it makes clear, it talks about emergency generators. It says permanent generators require a building permit, portable generators don't. And what we did is we put it all in the exemption section of the noise control ordinance, mainly because we just wanted it in one spot where it was easy to find what the operations and conditions would have to be. So specifically, we say generators for commercial use are allowed to run 24 hours a day during the PSPS event or prolonged power shutoff, whether it's called by PG&E or some other event. And we do recommend that they be shut off or they're not critically needed. We said generators for residential uses should not be operational or shall not be operational between 11:45 p.m. and 5 a.m. except for bona fide health and medical reasons. The reason we picked that time frame, which is a little more than 5 hours, is the thinking is if you had refrigeration, your refrigerator should be able to keep the food still cold enough at the required safety level, especially if you have ice in it too, if you have block of ice or something, that should be sufficient. We added something for testing of emergency generators between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Portable generators, we defined as obviously it's not connected to a structure, it's GL listed, and it's only intended to provide power during emergencies. And then we added in the provision related to noise, where we said portable generators should not exceed 69 dBA when measured at the property line. We indicated they should be a minimum of 10 feet away, But if it's not possible, at least in a place that's least disruptive to the neighborhood, my understanding for probably why San Rafael used 69 is 69 seems like there's a lot of generators out there, portable, that probably meet the 69 and below requirement. San Rafael, interestingly, they had 7 meters, or almost 21, over 21 feet from the property line. We didn't do that just because there's a lot of properties in town that you just wouldn't be able to meet that requirement, and that's why we added in the least disruptive location. So really, what we just tried to do in this section is give some provision to deal with emergency generators and sort of balance that need for people who use generators for various reasons against the issue of noise. So with that, concludes the staff report.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this to us. Much appreciated. Any questions of staff? Barbara?
I just have a couple of questions, or maybe it's a comment. I don't know if I should wait on comments.
Let's wait on comments.
Okay, it's just more or less clarifications, but that's fine. I can wait.
Okay, anyone with questions? No. John?
Yeah, I suppose it's not a question, but it's information.
Questions only.
Well, I mean, it's more information. I was just saying that, you know, I looked into what generators were available at Fairfax Lumber, for instance. You know, they had a model there that was advertised like, oh, this one's quiet, it's 68 decibels. You know, they had other models that weren't listed like that, so.
Okay, let's hear from the public and then come back and have a discussion. Rick, thank you.
Good evening, Council. Rick Hamer, Fairfax. The first thing I want to say is, as I was watching the Mill Valley ordinance be passed, and it was hastily passed, we have plenty of time before the PSPSs will come back to us. We don't have to hurry on this ordinance. Let's get it right. 68, 69 decibels is pretty loud for a generator. That would be your typical governor generator, not an inverter generator. To cite the Fairfax Farmers Market, those folks over there almost always use an inverter generator. They're quite quiet, 48 decibels when they're at low load. You barely hear them. I've owned a number of inverter generators, and there's a significant difference. And the reason for that is because any generator, in order to maintain 60 cycle electricity, has to run at a governed speed. It always runs the same speed. Whereas an inverter generator can slow down under part load, where it usually goes. I think that one of the workarounds for this is to limit the time more greatly. So if you're running a noisy generator, daylight hours. If you're running an inverter generator, maybe you can run it till 11 o'clock at night, or one of the hours that you already put in your model ordinance. Another thing to mention is San Rafael is very close to Interstate 101, to US 101, which generates a whole lot of noise. We're a great distance from that. So what works in 69 decibels in San Rafael is not great for our community here. So I know that a number of people already have generators, and they bought the 65 to 68 ones at Fairfax Lumber. I've bought a couple of generators from them too. But I think that running those at night and listening to the din of generators in the canyons at all hours, midnight to 5 a.m. being the only quiet time, I think that's asking too much, and I think we should not be moving this to a second reading next month. I think we need to think about it more. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the input. Richard.
Richard Applebaum, 61 Woodland. I definitely think that should get pulled, and I didn't even know this was a topic and that this was going on, and I'm fairly certain that hardly anybody in the town knows about this, and I may end up being in the minority. I oppose this on every level. I don't want permits for big generators. I don't want restrictions on hours. When we're in these like siege, feels like siege mentality to me when we lose power. I've lived in cities most of my life, never experienced this very often, and now I've been in Fairfax, and I'm a homeowner, and it's very, very uncomfortable to lose the power. And I'm looking at my own budget and trying to see what I can do down the line. And I don't know, has there been an outpouring? Have there been letters and calls about noise? And I don't know why we need to regulate this at all. It was 4 days, and I'm a late night person, so telling me I have to turn it off at 11 does me no good. I'm on the internet, I'm getting work done, I have calls in Europe and different times, things going on, but also I couldn't have my heat on. It was very, very cold back then in October, and I was depressed, and I was very uncomfortable. I went to LA. I drove to LA to my sister's to get out of it, because once PG&E was not assuring us that we were coming back on, it did come back on that Tuesday, but I didn't know, and they were talking about another week. I got out of here, and so I feel like this needs, maybe I'm going to be in the minority. I'm going to find out 95% of Fairfax wants peace and quiet from 12 to 5. But I don't know why we need to regulate this at all. It's a handful of days. This is going to start to be a regular thing because PG&E has not done the things over the last decade so that this wouldn't have had to been the case. And we're going to have more and more of this. And this just seems rushed in. We're looking at other towns do what they did and the noise thing and whatever. And, you know, when we don't have power, we rely on electricity in a very deep way. We're going to be put out for a few days, and it might be a little loud around town. It might be a little noisy, but I couldn't sleep because my heat couldn't come on because it requires electricity to turn the heat on, even though I have gas heat. The thermostat is electric. So being freezing was more disturbing to me than some noise. My neighbor behind me, they've been there for 55 years. They've told me war stories about things and floods and PG&E not coming for 30 days, and they threatened to climb up with their own tools and their own guy, and PG&E came out. They have a big, old, serious generator back there, and it's loud, and I'm jealous of them. Every time we get into one of these things, I hear their thing pop on, and I go, life is normal, you know, and very close by, and it's not for me. So I just feel like you need to hear more from the town about whether this is really an issue, the sound part, but all the other parts. And why do I have to go get a permit if I can suddenly afford a serious generator that could take over my house and I can flip the switch and live my life normally for 4 days or 2 weeks or whatever is coming? Why do I have to pay a fee and get permission for that? I don't understand. So I don't know what's motivated this. I don't know what the intention is. I'm sure it's a good intention, but I just don't know where it's coming from. Who's clamoring for this? What's broken that we need to fix with a new ordinance? So.
Okay, thank you so much. Frank.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Frank Ager, 13 Meadow Way. I have a concern with Section 1. And Section 1 is exemptions. Exemptions are hereby amended and restated as followed. And it gives exemptions for a portable generator. But F says the use of backup emergency generators during a prolonged power outage or emergency as declared by the town of Fairfax, state or local government agency or power utility, provided that the generator's owner has a building permit and the generator complies with current fire and building codes. You know, it says a prolonged or outage means no less than 4 hours in duration. But anyway, it's not really clear that you might have to get a building permit for a temporary generator, backup generator. I'm just reading literally F as it's written, and I think we need to address that. You know, during that last power outage, we had 2 small generators running.
I think you're referring to the first paragraph, and I had the same concern because later on it talks, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but later on it makes it clear that if it's a permanent generator, you need a building permit, but if it's portable, you don't. But that first paragraph is confusing.
Which paragraph are you referring to?
So when you're looking at F?
F, yes.
F has 3 paragraphs.
Yes.
And the first paragraph specifically said the generator owner has a building permit, but it's only required for a permanent generator, not for a portable.
It doesn't say that, though, there.
I agree. I raised the same issue, Frank, because I think we need to strike that because later on in the following 2 paragraphs, it clarifies when you need a building permit and when you do not. So I think you're raising kind of the same thing I was going to raise. But
Okay.
good point.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Mark Bell Dominga. Wow, it's only 4 days. Oh wow, 68 decibels is way too loud, even if it's on someone measured at their property line. And now it's a big concern, and now it's like need to like go to the noise ordinance. We were lucky because no one in our area had a loud generator. Other people did. But now you know what we go through. If it hadn't been for the owner of Perry's replacing the manager, we would be talking about days and days and days and hours and hours and hours throughout the year. This was only 3.5 days, 4 days, and all of a sudden there's this outrage. But when we come and we mention concerns that we have about noise, we're dismissed. I think really what we're looking at here is a bunch of hypocrisy. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Bringing it back for council discussion, comments. You can always ask a question. We have to make decisions.
So, Garrett, you talked about San Rafael. Can you share some of the specifications from Mill Valley?
Oh, so the question is, for San Rafael, or you asked
You said you
me
looked at San Rafael and Mill Valley.
Right.
Can you share some of the specifications from Mill Valley that they use in their...
Actually, Mill Valley didn't have any. Okay, best way, I have San Rafael's out. So San Rafael's is, instead of time frame, it says 69 dBA, which I notice applies to both permanent and portable. Ours isn't that clear. We should apply it to both permanent and portable. And it just requires it to be 7 meters away from the property line.
Okay.
That's pretty much what theirs is. Mill Valley actually doesn't set.
They don't have a decibel...
They don't have a decibel reading. If you hang on a sec, I could grab it. It's
okay.
in this pile somewhere. Oh, wait. Sorry. Wrong binder. Here we go. Yes. Their main thing was operations. And so they actually said, generators supporting residential uses shall not be operated during the hours of 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. So that was their main thing. They have Right, for residential. And well, same thing. You could test it between 9 and 8, and commercial could be 24 hours. So Mill Valley went with a longer period of time of when you couldn't run it, and San Rafael said you can run it as long as it's running a little quieter from 7 meters. I don't really know how they came up with 7 meters. I didn't bother trying to research or ask them that question. They do have setback requirements. I'm guessing they assumed 21 feet from the property line at 69 was pretty doable given the certain generators. So we stuck with 69. But it is true, in Section F, we could be more clear regarding the building permit. Later on, we do say permit generators requiring building permit. In case you want to know, we've issued 7. Since the PSP in October, we've issued 7 for permit generators. Prior to that, the building official couldn't recall ever issuing a permit for a permit generator. And we've done 7 battery backups for solar since that time. But that being said, we can make that more clear in the first paragraph, and you probably want to create the same dBA requirement for permanent as you do for portable, I would assume.
Okay, Barbara.
So I agree that we don't need to rush this through, but I would also say this is, I live in an area, we're on the grid with West Marin, and we've been out, nothing to do with PSPS. We've been out 7 days in a row. They don't care. So I don't think this is just about the PSPS, but I also know that a lot of people went out and bought generators during the PSPS or after. And so it's going to be, now that people have them, they're going to use them as soon as the power goes out, even if it's 1 day. And my next door neighbor bought one, and there's not going to be 10 feet to the property line. I live in a townhouse, so it's going to be loud, but I understand he wants to, keep his family warm. I also know I lived in the Midwest, and even though it was cold, I'm not going to die if the heat wasn't on. I was cold too, but it's not like being in Wisconsin when the heat's off, which I had that too. So I would just say a couple of things that I wanted to make clear on this was, and this is just little stickler things, but the fourth whereas, you know, this is kind of saying why we're doing this. And even though in the ordinance itself, it talks about the more than the PSPS, I think we should say as part of the PSPS program or during other prolonged power outages. That's the goal. And then I agree with what Frank said, and I've raised this before, that the first paragraph of F is pretty confusing because it infers that everybody would need a building permit even for a temporary or portable, whatever they're called, those generators. And I think we do need to be clear on the DBA. I would also say, and this is probably not going to make Richard happy, but I think 11:45 to 5 p.m. is really, that's pretty late for a lot of people. Now, I know some people work at night and all that, but I think if we're going to do this, we ought to ratchet those hours down more, maybe more on the order of 9 to 6 or so. Because I think people have to get their kids to bed, and I don't know what happened during the PSPS. A lot of the schools closed, but during a normal power outage where people are going to pull out their generators, you know, not a PSPS, kids will still be going to school if it's just your localized area. So I think we ought to be somewhat respectful of the neighbors. And I do know someone on Mono that ran a pretty loud generator for 24 hours straight, and it was really loud and it was quite large. And I think during the PSPS, people sort of overreacted maybe and went out and bought what they thought was going to keep them going for a really long time. So maybe they bought bigger ones than what you might not necessarily need. But those are just a few things. I don't know that we need, you know, we could probably talk about this more if there's more people interested in it, but those are just a few things I think we could change and make this better.
Thank you. Anyone else? First.
Okay.
Not at once.
I agree with those changes. I think those are good edits. There are other problems with generators besides the noise. There's the gasoline that they use, the pollution that they create, which can be quite a bit more than an automobile using a similar amount of gas because they don't have as much pollution control on them. And the greenhouse gases, of course, that they emit, which is ironic given the fact that the PSPSs are in response to the heightened wildfire frequency and severity, which is in turn due to the climate change that we're imposing on our planet. And so it's really sad to a lot of us who are trying to think about that issue that there was a run on all the hardware stores to buy generators to respond to the PSPSs. It's just kind of a step backwards. I don't know where the impetus came for putting this on the agenda, but I hadn't seen it until we saw this packet, and this is the first time that we've been able to discuss it, and so I wouldn't mind waiting another month just to let the public, in particular, have a chance to know that it's here, and if people wanted to comment on it, particularly with creative solutions, if we can find anything to this mess, to go ahead and do so. I will, it's a day too late, unfortunately, but there was last night an excellent presentation by the Environmental Forum of Marin. They do some great presentations in the Corte Madera Community Center on microgrids, and which is something that we're beginning to consider on the Climate Action Committee. We'll be probably talking about that on council possibly next month. But there is an alternative to generators. There are actually a number of alternatives to generators these days. And there was a lot of interest in them. In fact, the Corte Madera Community Center, which if you've been there, is a pretty large building, they had to bring in extra chairs. The place was absolutely packed for this presentation on microgrids, which was fairly technical. So I was impressed at the level of interest there is in Marin on the question of how to get through a power outage, how to what's called island, which is where one building or maybe a group of buildings would be able to separate from the grid when the grid goes down and keep on running on their own with solar power and battery backup as the source of energy, as opposed to kicking on a generator. So there are a number of different ways that this can be done. There are installations going up quite a bit that are using this, and I would just like to make sure that people are aware that there are these alternatives to generators. That I would see as more of a timely issue than just looking at the decibels of the generator to try to figure out how we can make our town more resilient in a better way.
Yeah, thank you for that. John?
Yeah, I think that's wise. I mean, I've got solar panels, and I'm looking into what it takes to actually have a battery backup in parallel as an alternative to a generator or something. I mean, generators can be a safety issue, especially if there's medicines and stuff like that need to be kept cold. I know I offered to a neighbor that had some medicine that needed to be kept cold that, we had a refrigerator that wasn't going to go off because I actually owned one of those small, I guess the inverter generator, but basically it's way quiet. They are more expensive. I happen to have one. They're usually, they're much quieter because of what, we just heard earlier during open time, because of the design, but they're also a lot less powerful. It runs a fridge and a computer and a couple of lights just fine. But it's a complex issue. I mean, yes, I've got one of those generators. I've also, unfortunately, I live in a neighborhood where I guess there's 4 different generators, one of which is an ancient Briggs & Stratton with no muffler. The thing's got to be 120 decibels, and they're just all running all the time. I got a number of calls, being a council member, from my neighbors. I did not ask for this to get put on the agenda. I was happy to see it here. But I also think that we shouldn't rush to it. This is a complex issue. I went down to Fairfax Lumber, saw that they're selling a lot of generators. They had one model out of the 4 ones available that was under 68 decibels. They didn't have any of the inverter generators, the quiet ones. For whatever reasons, I didn't talk with them about what their choice of stock was. But I guess, I noticed a lot of people buying them also. I got calls from a lot of constituents saying, I got to get up at 5 in the morning and teach school. I can't sleep at all. I'm on my 3rd day of sleep deprivation. It's causing some major problems in people's lives. And I don't know why somebody would be running a generator at midnight or 1 in the morning. So I think we clearly need some regulation around this. Also talking to somebody who works at Fairfax Lumber who has a generator that's a contractor's type of generator, so it's the loud kind. And he built a soundproof enclosure for it. What do you think about that? So he can't hear it, his neighbors can't hear it, and that's a way to get along with your neighbors. I don't think it's the kind of situation where you can say, oh, it's an emergency, let's throw all respect for our neighbors out the window, run it any time, day or night. There's got to be some workable solution in the middle where we can learn to get along. Property rights are reciprocal. I mean, you don't bug your neighbors, you try to get your neighbors not to bug you, and hopefully everybody can get along that way. I think that the proposed hours here of 11:45 to 5 a.m. it's a pretty short, quiet time. Differentiating between the different types of generators might be one approach. Requiring soundproof enclosures is another approach. Encouraging, solar and battery backup is an expensive option, but in long term, it certainly makes sense from climate perspective because these generators are probably about the worst way to get electricity that there is in terms of climate change. I had, when I first read through this, this section F, the first paragraph doesn't agree, and we've all been around that one. So I agree with those comments. But personally, I don't think we need to rush through this. We need to really look at what people's actions are and what there's got to be a work around it where we can live together as neighbors, and that does mean not waking each other up all night. Anyway, so I would expect to be able to talk to this more next time it comes around here. So thanks.
Okay, thanks. Stephanie, did you have anything? I just wanted to add, I'm in agreement. I don't think there's a rush. I appreciate that you brought it because the conversation is certainly up in the community. We were campaigning during those days in the dark, and most every street that I went to, there was a loud enough noise that people said, there's got to be something we can do. I had one next door to my house that went 24/7 for the whole time. And so I believe there's something we can do. And I think, speaking to Bruce's bigger issue, we need a community conversation around everything that has to do with how we're going to be more resilient with our energy use, everything that you said, Bruce, and hear from the Climate Action Committee about microgrids. And that's a conversation that we started around the PSPS that I hope will develop this year into a conversation about more community-wide resilience. But at this point, I don't think I'm hearing that we're not there. And so I would entertain a motion to speak to that.
So would I need to make a motion to continue it?
No, but I do need, I can ask a couple questions.
You need more direction.
Well, it's a couple clarification questions.
Okay.
So first of all, I will say for the record that Councilmember Reed wasn't the one complaining about his neighbors. Just to point that out.
Okay.
We did receive complaints to others, though, related to generators. And we anticipated this, whatever happens again, that we'll get more calls. And so that's why we brought this. But you're right, doesn't have to take any action at this point. But that being said, trying to be clear, I understand Councilmember Kohler's comments. Those are easy for us to address. It may not be verbatim, but we get the idea of making clear on the whereas, making clear on the permanent requires building permits, and then making sure the DBA applies to the permit as well as the portable. It sounds like what the DBA's...
Ratcheting down on the
well,
period.
I don't agree with that on the hours.
So the time, it sounds like you want us, it wasn't clear, the time seems like the majority want us to basically expand the time of non-operations?
Can we poll that? Because I didn't understand you, Stephanie.
Well, Barbara was recommending more of like the Mill Valley approach, more like 9 p.m. or
9 to 6, and I think Bruce agreed, and I thought I heard John kind of agree.
I didn't actually speak to the time, but
Okay.
Yeah, and I would support Mill Valley's like 9 to 7.
Okay, and Stephanie, what were you saying on that? You said you didn't agree.
I'm okay with the way it is right now, actually. If we have to have them, if we have to regulate them, I'm okay with the way it is right now.
Okay.
I'll come back to you with some options then.
I think that's
you
the
can
best.
just fill it in however way you like. I'll just
then
point out the Mill Valley.
And then we want to solicit some more feedback and community participation in this. How to do that is always the interesting, it's the question of the hour, but we can...
I will endeavor to put in a newsletter. I could do an online survey, but we'll do something so you can have feedback at your next meeting. I'm assuming I'll bring this back in March.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, and I'll be quick. It's interesting to me, this 68, or I don't know what variations are on the market right now, but what would support, you know, a 2-bedroom home, a 3-bedroom home, you know, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but, you know, and maybe we can tell our local merchants to better supply, so that people are probably just buying what they see and not necessarily knowing how loud it's going to be or how much it's polluting and so on and so forth.
I have an idea. Perhaps the Climate Action Committee could speak to Fairfax Lumber and a couple of the people, and then give a list of potential products that people could look into. If,
yeah, John and I could volunteer
options.
to look into that and talk with Fairfax Hardware.
Okay.
I can answer just very quickly that you were mentioning how big a generator would run a given size home. That question would really be more applying to a permanent generator, which this ordinance refers to, but which we have very few of in town. That would be, a permanent generator would be one that's wired into the electrical system. So for example, in this building, if this building had a generator and the power went off, then we turn the generator on, all the lights would come back on because the whole electric system would be re-energized. The temporary generators or portable generators that are what most people use aren't wired into the electrical system at all. So your electricity goes off, and they would turn the generator on, and then they would get an extension cord and they'd plug it into the generator, and then they'd plug a few things into their house into that extension cord, hopefully not causing a fire in the process with all these extension cords. But it doesn't go through the electrical system. So it's typically not going to run everything in your house because you wouldn't have plugged everything into it. So just to clarify what we're talking about.
Just to give you an idea, it's not even close. You know, you might, who knows, you might be able to, you know, if you ran 10 of these generators, run your house. I mean, and that's a phenomenal amount of gasoline and you know, I mean, you wouldn't do that. A lot of the louder generators that are designed to, you know, be taken to a construction site or something like that, where you're running power saws and stuff like that, and they have a fair amount of draw. Generally, you can, you know, you can run one thing at a time if you have like a power saw or something like that. And, you know, they kind of budget who gets to use the generator, I'd imagine. But yeah, you really, you know, you're just keeping your fridge on half of the time, and, you know, you might run a couple of light bulbs and charge your phone, but that's it. You're not going to turn your furnace on and off.
Okay.
Can I add one thing, just a safety issue? So one of the things that worries me about generators is carbon monoxide poisoning. And I will not be here on March 4th because that's my surgery date. But I really would like you guys to talk. I don't think the fire code would speak to that necessarily. I'd like you to really talk to fire about what they recommend, because, for example, like where I live, there isn't 10 feet to the property line, and my neighbor's going to be running his generator on his patio. Is that going to be a problem for carbon monoxide when it's right outside his house or my house? And not just that, you know, people running them in their garage, for example, that might exhaust to the house. I hope that when you bring this back, you can have some of the safety considerations, because that's really worries me also. I mean, Todd Lando speaks to his worry is somebody sitting there with gasoline on a wood deck, firing that thing up and creating fire. But the carbon monoxide really worries me, and so I think if there could be some safety provisions on that when you bring it back, that would be great.
So Garrett, or correct me if I'm wrong, Council, but it sounds to me that we're talking about multiple issues here. So we started with noise, but there really are multiple pieces to this: the safety issue, the climate, the emissions issue. Do we want to focus on noise, and or do we want to look at this more integrated, or?
Well, I think the door's kind of open when you talk about being consistent with the fire code to add a few more provisions to it, even though it is in noise. I mean, I know you're asking Garrett, but
well, I'm asking
there
all of
is
us.
kind of that door open where it talks about meeting the fire code. It just seems like if we could add something that would deal with safety to that, that would be great. And then maybe eventually there's something bigger, but if we can do it in this, because there's so many people that went out and bought generators.
Right. And then I would like to also just plant that seed with the Climate Action Committee, that this become some form of a way to inform people of their options that would be less climate offensive, or even talk about all the things with electric cars and powering your house and all those kinds of things. I think that would be an amazing service to the community. So with that, Garrett, do you have enough?
We'll come back in March with addressing your comments.
Okay, and anyone who's listening at home, please give some thought to this. Send us your input. Richard, go out there and inform people, and then, yeah, we'll see it in March. And moving on to item 13, it's 8:35, and this is our last item. Just
You
saying.
may have just jinxed it.
Just saying. Okay, so item 13, the subject is to introduce and read by title only ordinance amending Chapter 8.72 of the Fairfax Municipal Code regulating single-use foodware to clarify that the 25-cent charge applies to all disposable cups. CEQA exempt per CEQA guidelines, sections 15061B3, 15307, and 15308. Garrett?
Okay, so you may recall back in October 2019, the council adopted an ordinance adding a chapter regulating single-use foodware. In essence, it prohibited food vendors from providing non-compostable single-use food serviceware. Now, the mayor did notice in review of our ordinance and looking and comparing it to other communities that we had the word, when it came to disposable cups, 25 cents for every non-compostable disposable cup. And so the word non-compostable doesn't really match the San ordinance, and may not match others that may be coming up. And when we went back and looked, really the 25 cents is supposed to apply to all disposable cups, because the thought pattern is encourage recycling, bring your own cup, regardless if it's compostable or non-compostable. And so what we're recommending is the elimination of the word non-compostable before disposable, so just say all disposable cups. Now, we went back and looked at our notes and looked at the record, and we couldn't really see when we added the word non-compostable, so that's completely, we're unsure, because San Anselmo's ordinance does not have that word. But because of that, we couldn't really consider it a typo, so that's why we're bringing back this amendment to take out that one word. And then an item of note is right now there's no compostable cups that would be compostable to meet the requirements of the ordinance, but that's neither here nor there. The thought pattern is you want to encourage people to bring in their cups instead of using disposable cups. So with that, the mayor may want to add her thoughts on the matter, but pretty much we're asking for an amendment to eliminate one word.
Well done. Thank you, Garrett. Any questions of staff? All clear?
Not really, but I did get a question from a constituent today of, you know, I know we talked about this last time, and the 25 cents goes to the merchant, correct? I think that was in part of a larger ordinance, and that's not called out in this particular thing before us.
No.
Yeah, because, I mean, because it's not changed. I mean, this is just looking to the changes in that earlier.
Right, that's not.
So that's already specified in that earlier thing, and that was what somebody asked me.
Right.
So I thought I'd ask it here,
Yes.
you know, just to
That is not
clarify
being
that.
changed. The only thing being considered here is the amendment of the one word. Everything else stays. So If there are no more questions, any questions from, or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'd like to bring it back. If anyone would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we, to put it in simple language, remove that one word, but I will make a motion that we introduce and read by title only an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax, amending Section 8.72.070, disposable cup charge, of Chapter 8.72, regulating single-use foodware, of Title 8 of the Fairfax Municipal Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, so that is a motion, Ackerman, and a second, Kohler. And yeah, we already did it. Yes, yes, it carries. And the next thing for us to do is, we do have our council reports and comments at this time in our packets for everyone's review. I would like to ask for a town manager's report. I don't know what you have, but I would hope that many people are watching, because I would love it if you would talk about the PG&E tree clearing, line clearing, and the CAL FIRE grant evacuation route clearing, because it's causing confusion in the community, and it's a very good thing that's taking place, so we want everyone to understand it. We've asked PG&E for clarification so that it can be clearly put out to the public exactly what's happening. This is a CPUC mandate, and a good one. But there are a lot of questions and concerns from people about their trees, and also what's happening with the Fire Safe CAL FIRE grant and how they're working, because it's all happening at once. So do you have any more details, or anywhere where people can look for details?
So I think you summarized the PG&E thing. For PG&E, it's true, they're under direction from the CPUC, California Public Utilities Commission, to clear trees and brush away from the high-powered lines, which are typically on the top of the pole, and they got to go 12 feet all the way around. And so what they've done is they've had an arborist go around everywhere. In this case, we'll just say Fairfax, and they mark the trees with an orange tag. An orange tag means that's a tree that needs to be trimmed. If there's a red mark, that means that's a tree that needs to be removed because it's probably dead or dying per the arborist. So what PG&E has indicated, they've kind of gone out and done that. What the mayor indicated is we asked PG&E if they have any literature, flyers, something that we can send out to people so it could be a little more clear. Now that being said, the town has sent out 2 next door posts related to the matter, and it is on our website under news on the top. So if you click on that, if you go to our homepage, which is townoffairfax.org, you'll see what the orange tags on trees mean, and it kind of goes through a little more detail as to what PG&E is thinking. Now, in terms of their schedule, we'll be meeting with PG&E's contractor to try to figure out what exactly is their schedule. Obviously, they have been working already all through town. It's difficult to say when exactly they'll get done, but this is something they are mandated to do, and they talked about it last year, but obviously they're really going gung-ho now, obviously, before it gets to be fire season. Now, related to Fire Safe, you may recall as the council did approve an advanced funding agreement with Fire Safe for their vegetation management efforts. I believe it's, $300,000 they have to clear evacuation routes in Fairfax, Cascade being one of them, a bunch of other areas. And what they're going to do is they'll be contracting with their contractors, and their thought pattern is they'll be clearing a certain distance from the roadways. So whether that's 10, 20, 30, or 40 feet, it just depends on the area. They are planning to trim trees, but they are not intending to take any trees out unless they notice something dead, in which case they would come to us first. At least that's our discussion.
And
Now,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if they are on someone's property, they will only do that with the express permission of that
right.
property
Unless it
owner.
hangs into the right of way, then they can
right.
cut in the right of way.
Do they use the same color coding, do you know, or how does that
No,
work?
they're just, because they're trimming, they don't really need a permit if they're just trimming a tree per our our code. It's really what extends into the right-of-way. We have asked them for some literature, letter, flyer that we can post and send out to everyone. I think they may have sent some emails out to some of the fire-wise communities.
Are we linking that on the website? I think that Todd Lando's email is
Right, and so I asked them for something that seemed more official.
Okay.
So I could put it on the website and then we
Okay.
could send it out. So that's where we're at this moment, trying to make sure we have some official correspondence, or at least maybe his email and letterhead, so it seems like it's from that organization. Otherwise, it just has this little thing on the bottom of his email, and that's a little hard to see. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to, and that overall, the game plan is they're obviously trying to increase fire safety by clearing the evacuation routes. Unfortunately, it's happened at the same time as PG&E, lots of confusion. Everyone uses different contractors, and so we're just trying to sort that out so it's a little more clear to the
and just to
public.
put things in perspective, it was $1 million grant that was acquired from CAL FIRE for the county. We ended up with, I think, 860-ish for the county, and 300 is coming to Fairfax. And those are the main fire-wise neighborhoods. And, you know, fire-wise neighborhoods are growing, but Manor Hill, Deer Park, Forest Avenue, and the Cascades. And maybe on to, yeah, Manor Hill.
Tremendous amount in Manor Hill just in the past 2 days.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and they are getting a lot out. It's taken place all over. Kentfield got cleared, and so this is a really important project.
Can I ask something different, or if we're done with that topic? So I wanted to have an update on where we are on the financial software that we approved, I believe, more than 6 months ago. And I know it's a bit early, but I'd also like to hear that we're getting ready. 2 more things, where we are in the Parkade bus shelter, and then also how we're planning to move forward on the sidewalks, because I do not want to be here and say, we don't want to get in the middle of summer. Let's get those sidewalks done. So I'd like to hear how we're trying to be proactive to plan for both the parkade as well as the sidewalks, and also where we are in the financial software first.
Okay, financial software, and I think I sent you we sent the email, I can't remember what it said, but pretty much mid-February is mid-February will be the date by which we'll dump our last bit of information to the vendor for the financial software, because at some point you have to cut when you're all the new information, because obviously we're still using our old software. We'll be doing that. I believe we are on schedule to, I can't remember, did we say, do you remember, did we say July,
I feel like it was something like June, but I'm not just
remember.
asking for me.
Right.
I don't know how many people
do you
pay
remember?
attention to this. But
Okay, Michelle apparently remembers. 'cause
other
I'd have to
people
look for
have
my
an
email.
interest, and I think this will make our stuff more transparent. Yes.
Yes, I think we're going to go online in July, but we should be complete with our schedule working with the contractor, the software people, by June.
And are we
And then-
doing prior years as well? When we were in the financial committee, when I was mayor and Renee was vice mayor, I thought we had plans to go back a few years. I know we can't go back to some of the really old years, but do we
Well,
know that?
We have 3 years of data right now. After that, we have to go into the archives. So I think, and I'd have to double check with the finance director, is we're trying to put in what we have, and then if we can, then later we can go back and try to get some of the archive data. But right now our financial software can only hold 3 years worth of
Okay.
data.
Okay, that's great. So, and a little update for people listening on the Parkade bus shelter, and I know that you communicated recently with one of the contractors, but maybe just for more people who are interested in, let's move forward on that. What are we thinking?
Okay, so for the parkade, the latest was we had a few other contractors express interest in giving us a quote. Unfortunately, there's a little miscommunication on what they're bidding on, and so we've indicated to them we need something this week, and they have to be able to be willing to start in February. The other contractor that we talked about, we kind of clarified where we were at. We clarified his license, and then we were asking, can he also continue in February? So the game plan was try to get started in February. Also, we have a temporary bus shelter with sides that I think we finally figured that out, and that should be, once we receive the sides, that should probably be up next week. So we're proceeding ahead. One of these quotes should be fine, and then we can hopefully start in February. That's our target date.
I know the contractor that John Ramada's found had sent a note saying he accepted another job, so he couldn't start till March.
Great. And so we talked to him again. Well, we'll have to see. We're trying to talk to him again, and Mark Lockaby, our building official, is talking to some other contractors, and we'll see if one of them could do it within the February timeframe.
Okay, great.
And then sidewalks. So sidewalks, our building official is actually walking with one of the contractors tomorrow.
Great.
In downtown to identify the sidewalks and to firm up what the budget and schedule should be. The one portion that we were planning to do was over where, what's the address? 31 Bolinas, where Fort Paws and
Right.
Moss. Originally, that was on the schedule, but there's some issues, call it with an adjacent property owner regarding that in PG&E. So that's probably not going to be within the first phase. The first phase is going to try to be the curb ramps, the monolot, and some of the other area in front of the monolot at Scott House, and some of the other areas on Bolinas where we said needed to be repaired or repled. So that's what we're
And
doing.
Broadway, we were talking about trying to do Broadway at the same time.
Right. So he'll walk Broadway. We still don't think it's really that bad.
But the
we'll look.
point was, we approved this, so I don't
Right.
want to kind of debate. If it's not that bad, we're not talking about completely replacing the sidewalks. We're talking about repairing the areas that need repairing. And then I believe we were going to take the Sir Francis Drake side, where it's the tree issue, to the tree committee, right?
Right. So we have to.
So
we'll have
I
to do
guess
that.
my thoughts are, it sounds great that we're walking Bolinas. Let's walk Broadway to see what areas we need to repair. And I think when last you and I talked, we talked about bringing the Sir Francis Drake issue where those trees are just pulling up the sidewalk huge to the tree committee as soon as possible, so we can be poised, if possible, to fix that as well. Since it's not that area is not that bad either, we could probably do all of it within the money we allocated without having to go out very extensively for bid.
Right. So we'll definitely do the Taylor curb ramp. Yes, we'll talk to the tree committee. Pretty much the only way to fix that is you probably are going to have to take the trees out. But we said we talk to the tree committee and get their thoughts.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, that was a robust town manager's report. Thank you. We do have this future agenda items thing here, if anyone has anything that's on the top of their head.
Well, the one thing I mentioned last time was to do short-term rentals, and I know that has to go to our planning commission first, so I'm hoping that goes soon. And I know currently in our code, although we don't specifically ban short-term rentals, there is no allowance for rentals under 30 days, so they are sort of banned. So my question is just, could we bring that to the planning commission sooner rather than later so that we can bring that here sooner?
Thank you.
I second that.
Yeah, it's on the list. It's on the list to go to the planning commission and then to the council. Obviously, the council, you discussed this several years ago and what you thought.
Right.
Planning commission discussed it several years ago. It could be that everyone's minds on certain issues have changed, but we'll go to the planning commission and then you'll get a recommendation and
Any
decide at
idea,
that time.
any time frame? I know how much they're dealing with, but I just wonder if we can have some sort of.
Well, we'll go to the planning commission. I just don't know if it's only one planning commission meeting or two or what they're thinking. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to say.
So we're not bringing it this month to the planning commission?
Well, We weren't planning to. I guess it might be difficult because the planning director's not even here. It's on vacation right now. So.
Well, then
Can we
why don't
shoot
why don't
for
we bring it
March?
to the next one?
So March is,
March.
is clearly doable to the planning
Okay,
commission.
well, let's start it because it's been a long time in coming. I see a public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Frank Ager again. We currently have a transit occupancy tax on the books, and when you read it carefully, it includes short-term rentals, and we're not collecting a TOT from short-term rentals, and I don't know how much money we're losing out on, but it might be enough money to help add another person to the planning department to help implement some of these ordinances we're trying to deal with, ADUs, et cetera. But it's really clear that the ordinance says that they're supposed to be paying that transit occupancy tax, the short-term rentals. It's right in the ordinance right now.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we are ready to adjourn our meeting, and I'd like to adjourn in memory of Kathy Williams and Sharon Olson.
And those are two people that I've known, one for probably 40 years, and they both died on the same weekend, one on a Friday and one on a Saturday, and they were about my age, and both had recurrences of cancer, so it's very sad.
Sorry for your loss, Barbara. And with that, thank you all for staying. It is 5 minutes to 9, and yeah, awesome. Okay, thanks so much. Have a great month.
Thanks.